Okay, we're live, everyone.
Morning and Happy New Year. Welcome everybody to the first Nottinghamshire and City of Nottingham Fire and Rescue Authority Community Safety Committee of 2021. Have we had any apologies for absence, Catherine?
You're all present, Chair.
All present, okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest? Just to remind people, if it's been some time obviously operating on here, that there's a number of features that we've got. You can click on participants if you do so to raise your hand. We've also got a chat function if people want to ask questions and so on, and to make people aware that obviously we're currently live on YouTube. Can we have a look at minutes of the last meeting, please? Have we got any matters of accuracy? No. Any matters arising? Okay, can we take those as agreed then? Moving on to item 4, service delivery report, performance report. Is that you, Craig?
It is, Chair. I'm going to ask Area Managers Sharman and West to come in on the different elements that they're responsible for. So Area Manager Sharman is responsible for service delivery response, and Demi West is prevention and protection. You're obviously heads of department and lead that, so they'll be able to walk us through in a little bit more context on that. I suppose really just in terms of setting the background for this one, this is obviously in the context, as members will be well aware from their own constituent authorities in the period of pandemic and COVID. So what I would sort of say to members around the figures and making comparisons to non-COVID periods, just take all that really with a pinch of salt, because as we know, these are not normal times. And I wouldn't want us to sort of think we're either doing poorly or we're doing well. On the whole, we're doing very, very well, regardless of COVID. But I don't want us to be too pinned down by either improvements or decreases in performance where they should be apparent. So what I would ask is if Mick and Damien can walk us through the report in terms of response and prevention protection, if that's all right, Chair.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Morning, all. I'll take the first bit in terms of the report and start on section 2 of the report. There's quite a lot of data that's contained within the report, and I won't take you through all the data and all the numbers as the Deputy Chief has just already alluded to. Some of the context around the data, but what I will point out is some of the significant parts of the data. 2.1 really just demonstrates that we've attended 2,238 incidents during the period of 30th September to 30th of November. And in terms of context, that's a decrease of about 106 incidents, which is not significant, which is all within the levels of fluctuation that we might expect on year. Just some things that I do want to point out to you that I think is particularly important, particularly about giving members some assurance regarding the performance, particularly during the times of difficulty around COVID, is in section 2.3. I'd just like to point out that the service has a set standard of attending incidents within an average of 8 minutes. Well, it's pleasing to see that overall average time still remain below 8 minutes, even during this difficult time. And we're still turning out on an average of 7 minutes and 7 minutes and 42 seconds, which is below the standard that we've set as part of our strategic plan. Another pleasing element of the service is our on-call availability. We set a standard of trying to maintain an average of 85% availability for each individual section, and in 2.4 we are reporting on an average availability of 91.75%, which in some way, in terms of the context, has got something to do with COVID, in terms of the individual's ability to support their sections and give good availability. Whilst there are many negative implications of coronavirus, one of the positive for us is the availability of individuals to give their time to support their local communities. I'd just also like to point you to section 2.6. This is where we report on our performance for the the collaboration that we have with Derbyshire Fire and Rescue Service in terms of the provision of the joint control. It's pleasing to see that we are meeting or we are exceeding the set standards that we've agreed for joint control. We continue to answer all the calls within the set target time and maintain the system availability to ensure that we are able to mobilise and the adequate resources to deal with the incidents that's required. 2.7, one of the negative implications of coronavirus is it has impacted on our operational exercise and activity, and unfortunately, as a consequence, we've had to see some of the practical exercises that we do with our partners. We've continued to try and do these differently and deliver tabletop exercises and familiarisation exercises, but COVID has impacted our ability to train with other people. Just very quickly, 2.8 to 2.11 really continues to give members an overview of the partnership work that we're doing to support our communities during the coronavirus. And it's very pleasing to say, and unfortunately I haven't got the data in front of me, but as you'll see in 2.9, to date, the service has delivered, to date, during that time period, the service has delivered 11,000 food parcels. When you compare the activities that we've carried out against other fire authorities, and Damien might know, or certainly the Deputy Chief might know, but in comparison what other services are doing, we've done a staggering amount, and it's really pleasing to see what we've been doing, whether that be food parcels, medications, etc. And it's really been, very heartwarming to see the response of the service in terms of supporting our communities. That's it from myself, Chair. Unless any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Mick. Have you got any questions at this point, Sue?
I mute myself. No, I was just going to say, Chairman, I think they should be commended on that. I mean, has been the most difficult of times to do anything, and to deliver that amount of parcels and still keep the standard up. I think, they all need congratulating. It's not been the easiest. We haven't started the easiest this year. Goodness knows what's ahead of us. And I think, that is to be commended.
Absolutely. Harry?
Yes, I'm looking for 2.9. The data service been delivered 11,000 food parcels. All of those food parcels came available from? Which group or whatever may be the case to be delivered?
Yeah, I could try and answer that one, Councillor. The food parcels come available from a number of different sources. We have a lot of partnership working relationship with food banks. We have a lot of relationships, and there are certain stations that have collection points for food parcels, and then we distribute them to more organised food banks, and that's where we find the need or whereabouts we need to be able to deliver those food parcels to. So it's working with partners to identify the need.
Thanks,
okay, Mick. Thank you. Thank you, Neil.
Have we got any further points or questions, colleagues?
Chair, just a bit from me, if I may. I suppose more, because it is an area of scrutiny and change, you'll notice we've got a great story around on-call availability, but we do report day shift crewing for Ashfield and Retford separately here because it was a new model. And some of those figures may not support the whole of the kind of like everything looks rosy in the garden. But just to give you context, there is a separate report coming as a review report around day shift crewing that will come with a little bit more context and detail. I think what we are seeing is some of those challenges that we laid out when it was recommended to authority we're still seeing that as a progressive problem in terms of getting people on the on-call system. But we're also initiating a pilot project as well in the next few months around on-call contracts. So we can have a different look at how we can try and attract local residents who may be interested in an on-call, but the remuneration offer may be somewhat different. And we're hoping that that will be, another way of attracting people to support that. But generally speaking, we'll get another report, whether it comes to CS committee or full authority, because of course the decision for day shift crewing was taken at full authority, not within committee. And just to reiterate what Mick said around how we compare to other fire and rescue services, National Fire Chiefs Council did a infographic some weeks ago, and it looked like that Nottinghamshire, out of the English fire and rescue services, Nottinghamshire delivered something like 10% of those figures. So when you think there's 40 odd fire and rescue service, English fire and rescue services, and Nottinghamshire managed to deliver 10% at that point. So something to be very proud of. And we've also had the COVID thematic inspection from the HMI that's commended us for the work we've done, with only 2 real minor points where we could look at making some improvements. But that really wasn't focused necessarily on our community safety activities. So quite a proud moment really, and we've made some really good significant improvements. But to reassure members, we're certainly not complacent about any element that was within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Absolutely, it sounds a wonderful achievement. Is Damien going to talk us through the prevention part now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Morning, councillors. So I'll take you through the prevention, protection and fire investigation elements of the report. First of all, just to outline to members the approach we've taken in terms of prevention since the start of COVID. So as you'll be aware, we deliver safe and well visits to the most vulnerable people in our communities. And back in March, during the first lockdown, we took the approach to pause the delivery of safe and well visits by our frontline operational response crews, partly to limit the exposure both to our crews, which is important we maintain their availability for emergency response, but also to mitigate the risk presented to those vulnerable community members. At that point, our persons at risk teams, who are our specialist intervention team within prevention, took over all of the delivery of safe and well visits to communities, so a huge undertaking. To deliver that, we have implemented a triage process. So every referral we receive, either from crews, from partner agencies or from members of the public themselves, is now triaged against the Charlie matrix. So you'll be aware of the Charlie profile, which demonstrates the higher likelihood of injury or death from fire. And we then are able to categorise those from low, medium, high and very high risk individuals within the community. And our persons at risk team have been prioritising attendances to in-person visits to the high and very high risk referrals that we receive. Every referral we receive gets a telephone contact, and we have made contact with them to give advice over the phone, to offer signposting, and we will follow those up. As part of the COVID grant money, you'll be aware that we received from the government. We've used part of that to employ 4 additional personnel on fixed term contracts to help address that backlog. And we are continuing to review that as we progress through the second lockdown. But the reassurance to members is that those high and very high risk individuals in the community, we're still visiting them in person in a COVID secure manner and making sure that they have the appropriate interventions taken. So the report highlights, and the slight anomaly of this report is this was the period covered by the report, the quarter covered, fell when we had a slight relaxation in restrictions. So we were able to complete 1,493 safe and well visits. And during that time, we continued to carry out the telephone triage and also carry out our specialist interventions, including areas such as death alarms as well. Sadly, during that time as well, we had a number of serious fire-related incidents, but we continued to follow those up with our community reassurance and engagement activities. And you can see in 2.16, we carried those out across the county and the city following serious incidents. Members will already be aware that we sadly had 2 incidents that resulted in the loss of life, 2 fatal incidents, one in Top Valley and 1 in Costock. And again, I just point members to 2.17, where it highlights the effect of those community reassurance activities, as we attended 523 premises in Costock alone following that incident. And worthy of note, we continue to identify a high percentage of lack of smoke alarm ownership. So that's focusing in our year 3 plan, and will continue to be a focus for the prevention team and the response teams over the coming months. We continue to engage in the National Fire Chief Council campaigns calendar. And as you will appreciate, a lot of those public interactions that we would normally have aligned to our campaigns haven't been possible. So we have taken those mainly to social media, working with partners and working with the local media outlets to make sure we still get those messages across, such things as Electrical Safety Month, Bonfire Night and Diwali celebrations. So we're still trying to make sure we engage with communities well there and evaluate that engagement to see how we can continually improve. Moving on to protection activities, we have worked in line with the National Fire Chiefs Council guidelines during the period of COVID restrictions, and that's seen us have a blended approach between desktop audits and still delivering face-to-face audits where businesses are classed as COVID secure. In 2.21, you'll see the breakdown of activities, and whilst that is reduced, as the Deputy Chief Fire Officer mentioned at the start of the meeting, you can see that still a significant amount of work, including 6 enforcement notices and 5 prohibitions being issued. So there where we see the most serious breaches of fire safety compliance. And a lot of that work continues, particularly through the joint audit and inspection team, which we have with the City Council. We experienced a serious industrial fire at a non-domestic premises in Blidworth, and again we carry out a business reassurance and engagement activity very similar to the ones we carry out after serious domestic fires. And you'll see in 2.22 we engage with 38 businesses of similar types and in the similar geographical area, able to engage with them, giving them support and really working with them around their fire safety efforts. In 2.25, we touch on the collaboration work, which is continuing with the JATE, the Joint Audit and Inspection Team with the City Council. The real value that that is bringing to the communities, particularly in the city, and the particular demographics that we see there. We've completed over 100 premises inspections now, and this is where we attend with members of the housing team to develop a really holistic approach to that inspection. One thing I would just raise to your attention is that last sentence. Around 47% of the premises we have inspected have had issues around fire compartmentation. So this is the structural integrity of the buildings was being compromised, which therefore can lead to fire spread. So it really highlights the importance of the work we're doing there, and the way we are able to work with business owners to remediate those issues and keep people safe. The final point there, 2.27, just to highlight the activity of fire investigation team. Again, continually very busy during the COVID period. In this quarter, they carried out 33 Tier 2 fire investigations. So that's where our specialist fire investigation officers, working in collaboration with regional partners, carry out fire investigations at incidents across commercial, domestic, vehicle fires, and including obviously the fatal fires on behalf of Her Majesty's Coroner. Happy to take any questions, but hopefully that gives you a good summary of prevention, protection and fire investigation.
Thanks, Damien. Have we got any questions, colleagues? Parry?
Thanks, Nick. About the bonfire. Despite the COVID-19 last year, in my mind, it seems it became start early and finish late for a very, very long time. Was those people who light fires and fireworks and things like that, did they have the necessary permission to do so? Thank you, Neil.
I can answer that, Chair. So we obviously saw the disbandment of organised events last year for bonfire night. So that led to a lot of local or private events against guidance. You may have seen in the media, we did a lot of proactive work around trying to advise members of the community around the one, asking them not to necessarily have fires or to carry out their own bonfires, but if they did, how to do that safely. So we did see a number of incidents that we attended, and we did work with Nottinghamshire Police to expand a number of issues, particularly around the Gedling area, where we worked with them to encourage people away from a communal fire that they had set. But the challenge we had was around people having those in their own domestic area, in their gardens, in their homes, which they don't need any particular permission to do. And what we really focus on there then is around trying to educate them around the dangers that the fires can present, but then also trying to educate them around how to do it safely if they really are determined to do that. So we didn't see a great increase on normal years, but I think very much as you mentioned, Councillor, the longevity of it seemed to start very early with those celebrations and continue on into late November. So we did a lot around proactive work there.
Thank you. Neil, can I just come back again, if you please?
Yeah, of course, Barry.
Thank you. In the meantime, it's been reported to me as a local councillor in the area, the people were taking advantage in the residential areas and they were burning industrial waste. I mean, how can we monitor that kind of situation?
So again, that's sorry, Jay, if I can come back on that one. Yeah. So again, we work very much around trying to educate people and liaise with them. We also, this falls under the local authority in terms of environmental health. So we did liaise with them over a number of particular issues that were made aware to us. And they are the regulatory authority for that side of things. So it's very much trying to engage with them. But again, the difficulty there is if people are determined to burn off plastics or products that could create dark smoke in their private gardens or with private businesses using bonfire night as an opportunity to get rid of their industrial waste, it's very hard to prevent that. And it's very much around educating them and making sure we can respond if there's a risk to people or to property, and then working with the police and local authority to make sure we capture any information. So we pass on any information that's pertinent to either environmental health or Nottinghamshire Police.
Thanks, Damien. Have we got any other further questions, colleagues? No. Could I ask you one, Damien? It's in terms of 2.25 when you're talking about the joint inspections, the joint audit and inspection team. Obviously, the statistics are worrying there in terms of 47% have got fire compartmentation issues. I take it that's when properties have been adapted to put extra rooms in bedrooms or, access, etc. The other thing is, how do we decide which properties to visit? Is that due to the landlord inspection scheme, or do we use Intel, or is it a range of both? And how do we enforce? Because that's quite high, isn't it, in terms of the result?
So yeah, a few points there then, Chair. Initially, yes, very concerning. It's something that's been highlighted. A lot of the developments in the city are change of purpose. So we see a lot of office blocks becoming student accommodation. We see a lot of older buildings being renovated. And a lot of the compartmentation issues occur where work persons are adapting premises. So a common one is the installation of fire alarms, which is quite ironic. They will drill through the walls to put the wiring in, and then they don't make sure that compartmentation is then reinstated following those works. So we're working both reactively doing our audits, but also proactively to engage with building developers and building owners so they're aware of these issues so that they can hopefully stop them happening in the first place. In terms of how do we prioritise that work, so we've got a methodology which has been agreed with the City Council around how we inspect those. And that's a balance of likely risk, so the number of occupancies. So if we've got a residence that's housing 1,000 people, the risk is obviously greater than a smaller individual dwelling. But we have a commitment to inspect all premises over 11 dwellings in the city, and that's how we're looking at those at the moment. We then prioritise them based on a number of different things. Part of that is local intelligence, part of that is previous engagement. We also look at common factors, so those that have share the same building owner or responsible person, and equally we're looking at those that share people who've been where they've had work signed off by the same approved inspectors, where they may have common findings between the different properties as well. So we use a really blended approach through a type of risk-based inspection programme to prioritise those visits. And then finally, the bit around how do we enforce that? So we will always work in line with the regulators code to work with the building owners to mitigate any issues. But of course, our primary concern is the safety of residents. So you will have seen there were some prohibitions. We've only had one prohibition as part of the joint audit and inspection team, and that's where the risk was so great that we had to stop part of that premises being used. We have had one other building owner who voluntarily prohibited an area, and we will always try and follow those processes where possible. But we have a range of options for our fire safety inspectors to follow. And the great thing around working with the City Council in this particular area is that we can either use the Housing Act or the Fire Safety Regulatory Reform Order to use the best legislation to make sure that's remediated as quickly as possible. So we will work informally and formally where it's needed with the business owner. And a lot of it depends on how willing that business owner is to engage. We will always try and work with them to make it better for both themselves and their residents. But if we need to, we have the legislative power to enforce against them as well. So we'll work on that sort of blended approach.
Okay, thanks very much, David. Very clear. Stephen?
Chair, if I could just add a little bit to that as well with my engagement with City. I think what's clear is that the approach is being recognised nationally as good or best practice. So the National Joint Inspection Team have been and done a local visit and seen as notable practice. So I think the partnership should be commended on that basis between the City and the authority and the work they're doing. I think just to reinforce what Damien said, that's 47% compartmentation issues alongside all the other issues that have been found as well. So these aren't just in isolation. And we are also visiting what we consider the higher risk premises first. So you would expect to see over a period of time those issues fall away. However, I'm not seeing those indications from the first samples that that's going to be the case. And I know we've got challenging times ahead. And we're being under scrutiny. Certainly HMI are going to look at us about how we use our legislative powers for enforcement. So there's an expectation from HMI that you're quicker off the mark almost in terms of using your powers to make sure buildings are safe. And also what we expect at the group coming forward is we'll see performance. So Damien touched on there, where we see approved inspectors signing off works in a building, are we seeing the same problems in buildings with the same approved inspectors, with the same developers, with the same landlords? Because that might inform, if we see a property owner with 4 buildings where we've got problems, we might go and visit all their buildings then, because they've got the same philosophy towards the safety of building users. So really good piece of work there. I guess in context of the report around prevention and protection as well, we made it very clear at the beginning of COVID, we were going to remain visible to communities as a public servant. And so we're trying to safeguard our staff wellbeing. Of course we are, but we're trying to make sure that we're doing our job on the communities we're here to serve as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Craig. Stephen, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, thank you. Is it going out in the districts as well, you know, like Mansfield, Ashfield, Worksop, Newark, you know, you say the city, but obviously there are IMOs and different things in the local smaller towns.
Yeah, Damien?
Answer that one if you like, Chair. So the approach has been offered to all local authorities, so the district councils and obviously the city council as well. I think the difference comes down to capacity and also risk. So you're quite right. The building risk review has highlighted premises, high rise, high-risk residential buildings across the city and the county, across the districts. I think what you'll find, the motivate there is that the city has the ability to afford personnel to a team at this time, at this moment. So we're able to detach that because of the quantity of premises in their city and the concentration of those. So there's over 500 high-rise, high-risk buildings. When you look at places like Mansfield or Newark and Sherwood, that's definitely in single figures in terms of the ones that have been raised. What we have is a different approach in the district. So we still work very, very closely with the local authority to make sure we have those joint inspections. But in terms of the critical need for a focused approach, it's very much focused with the concentration of those types of buildings. But just to reassure you, Councillor, we have very good working relationships across every district. We have regular communication and our geographical teams within fire protection are constantly in liaison. A good example of that is recently in Bassett Law, we had some concerns raised that spanned across modern slavery, inappropriate living conditions and non-domestic, so fire safety issues in the commercial premises. We've had a joined up approach to deal with that, and it really proves, like the proof is in the pudding there, around how it's been delivered and dealt with. So we have good relationships across both the local districts and the city.
Okay, thank you, Damien. Stephen, do you want to come back on that one? You're on mute there, Councillor.
No, it's just a thank you. Just thank you for the update.
Okay, thank you very much. The recommendation is just to note this. Are we happy to do that, colleagues? Yep, good, thank you. Next, moving on to Majesty's Inspectorate update. Craig?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members will be well aware that Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabularies and Fire and Rescue Service was reinstated. This is something that's been absent for a decade or so from Fire and Rescue Services. We had our first inspection, crikey, you know, it's fast approaching 2 years ago, really, that we started actually doing the work for this. And the result of that is we had 24 areas for improvement. So we had a couple of areas where we were good, and a lot of work was taking place prior to HMR coming anyway, and we've done a lot of work. So we had 25 areas for improvement, and following the report from the Chief Forester Authority, it was decided that they would be split up and reported to individual committees, 12 of which were actually coming to Community Safety Committee. You'll see from the report, I don't intend to go paragraph by paragraph, but 2.3 now highlights the status of those that would be reported to Community Safety Committee. And these will be coming through for sign off, because I believe that 4 and 9, certainly 4 I think is there or thereabouts over the next month. We're just waiting for some evaluation work. We've got the draft evaluation report already that NTU are doing on our behalf. And that was really just to make sure that we are targeting our prevention work at those most at risk. And that is something that Damien's been leading over previous months. So that one will be getting closed off very shortly. And area for improvement 9. Now this was about the reliability of mobile data terminals that operational crews use. So the information they get on a tablet computer on the fire appliance. And that work is, that was more about the reliability, not the access to information. So some of the crews routinely report that there are failures in the mobile data terminal. In actual fact, the biggest area of concern is where they leave the fire station with the Wi-Fi network that it's connected to. They then have to leave the station and pick up the mobile networks, so EE or Vodafone or whatever. And there's a delay which looks like the system has failed, but we've not really got any issues about them accessing information. But again, you can see that's making good progress. And I think we've only got, 4 now areas for improvement overall that are outstanding. What I would say, Chair, and to the rest of the committee is that just because the AFIs are signed off doesn't mean to say that everything is like, well, that's it then, we can put our tools down. We're certainly not being complacent, and we're certainly making sure that we're trying to embed all the areas for improvement so they are actually part of this, of the DNA of the organisation, not just a task we got to the end of and we've moved on to the next thing. So that's probably what I'd like to say, Chair, is that, you know, things have gone really, really well. Hopefully we'll be able to sign these 2 off. It indicates in the report. We're just about completed on AFI 4 completely, and AFI 9 is certainly making good progress and is on track to be completed by March. So if there's any questions more generally on this or the wider HMI, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. It does a lot. We're making excellent progress. Have we got any questions or comments, colleagues, on that? No? Okay, no, thank you, Craig. In terms of that, we just again note it, I believe. We happy to do that, colleagues? Okay, thank you. Next item is, sorry, I'm getting right back to the top now. Oh yeah, it's unwanted fire signals update.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'll ask Mick and Damien at any point really as to like sharing with this. Covering the recommendations first, obviously there's a note report, but there's a little piece in there as well, Chair, in the recommendations about we are going to look to see how we can explore and make further improvements in reductions as well. And that is one of the recommendations. So it's written in that kind of context, in so much the report will detail that we've made good progress, but we believe actually there's still more improvements that could be made. Unwanted fire signals previously would make up something like 40–45% of all the emergency turnouts of fire engines. So when you look at if we do about 10,000 incidents in total, 4,000 of those actually resulting in being an unwanted fire signal. And we believe that's a significant impact on us being able to do more proactive work. We've moved away from sort of saying that this is like a financial saving that can be made. It's probably non-cashable and in terms of making efficiencies. So our response crews, for example, could be doing more visits to buildings and risk premises. They could be doing more training around buildings just in case we do have an incident rather than a fire alarm going off. And we could be doing more safe and well visits. So it's in the context of using that time to be a lot more proactive for communities. And that's why it's important we push this down. You could look at some of these incidents as taking at least an hour for a fire appliance, and sometimes we may take more than one fire appliance. So the hours over the year are quite significant. Report goes on to talk about the context of the tri-service policy. This was agreed because, of course, we've got tri-service control between ourselves, Leicestershire and Derbyshire, and it was about forming a policy that all three could deploy, and that would about giving some consistency across all three control rooms. We implemented the policy, going on kind of 2 years now. Derbyshire and Leicestershire have not implemented the policy in full, but mostly in spirit of what we have done. We've seen the data now, and obviously there are some premises based on risk that we call challenge all the time, but some premises in 2.2, as you can see there, are exempt from call challenging. This list again will be part of a review because we are looking at a new risk-based inspection programme. So what that will mean is we will look at a lot of data about which premises cause us concern in terms of risk, and then we will reflect our other policy framework, things like unwanted fire signals and our mobilisation procedures, to make sure that that reflects that as well. As you can see, moving down further down the report, the kind of the good news story side of it, 2.5 and 2.6, we've got something like a reduction of a third now since we've introduced this. And that is absolutely fantastic when we think about what's being done. And again, it'll be under review. If subject to members feeling that's the way we want to go, we'll review it and bring back maybe some suggestions to authority and committee about how our officers feel we could make further improvements and reductions as well. But generally that section 2.5 down to, I guess, really 2.10, where it talks about the resources that are included. It's generally a good news story again, Chair. Hopefully I'm trying to bring some balance. We're not being complacent. There's lots of work left to do, and we know we've got a lot of learning still to do, but it certainly is good news. The bit what I would sort of say, the top offenders continue to be a small number of premises. So things like the major hospitals, very complex estate layouts, very complex in terms of alarm systems and provisions, who all have their own fire safety teams. So we will continue to work with those teams, but also we believe that there is more we can do in terms of ensuring they really have a proactive focus on reducing this, rather than waiting for the fire service to turn up, making sure the responsible persons are actually taking responsibility. And there is processes there in 2.12 where we talk about where depending on how many occurrences they get, they'll get a letter, they'll get a full audit, and and ultimately they fall under the fire safety order and us as a regulator. And we wouldn't want to be charging people for things in the public sector or health. That's not where we'd want to be. But equally so, they need to make sure they're complying with the legislation and good practice and keeping their building users safe. Lots more kind of detail going down there in terms of predetermined attendances. I'd ask really Mick or Damien if there's anything I've missed that they feel is pertinent they'd wish to pick out, or any questions from members, Chair.
Thank you. Damien, Mick, anything you want to pick out?
Yeah, Chair, just to highlight on some of the recommendations, you see in 2.19 some of the steps that other services across England have taken. One of those is not attending automatic fire detection calls at all. And whilst we're not at that position at all within Nottinghamshire, it does highlight the steps that other authorities and fire and rescue services are taking. So you've seen there different options in 2.19. I think the options, as the Deputy Chief has pointed out, the work for officers to go away and that mandate to go and have a look at how we can further reduce that. A third of our calls approximately are still to unwanted fire signals, so quite a significant number. So I think this is, just to echo what the Deputy Chief said, a real opportunity for us to take this really good work and extend it even further.
Thanks. Mick, you got anything you want to add to that? No? Okay. Parry?
Thanks, Nick. I would like to ask you an additional question, actually, and it's concerning about local streets in the local localities partially is blocking the passing by the emergency services, fire, ambulance. And I wonder how often they've been checked or make some kind of presentation with police in order to, be on top of that situation, not to be happen in this case of emergency. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks. Do you want to come back on that one?
I think Mick will on that one, Chair.
Hi, Chair, Councillor. Yes, you're quite right, Councillor. There are occasions when we respond to emergency incidents where we find the access to particular premises, primarily domestic premises, more challenging than others. And that's primarily due to the parking regulations that surround specific streets or roads. It is a constant challenge, and we had an incident probably about 2 years ago now where it contributed to the difficulties that was actually achieving the results that we want to achieve in terms of attending a domestic fire. It is quite problematic and it is quite difficult to legislate. We do work when we identify problems. There's a number of actions that we do take. We try and work with the individuals in terms of their moral responsibility. We proactively, if we find these premises where we do have difficulties, we proactively leaflet these in the streets, and we put leaflets on cars, and we ask individuals to be considerate in terms of their parking, and to consider not only the attendance of a fire appliance, but the attendance of an ambulance as such. So we do that proactively. And secondly, if that consists, we do try and work with the local authorities. That has proven very difficult in terms of working with local authorities, if I'm being honest. And the problems, because we've been informed that as part of the regulation to bring in parking restrictions, they would do it through the consultation process, which usually does not prove it doesn't prove positive results. So yeah, it is a challenge. We have got a proactive approach, and we have got a reactive approach as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mick. Anything to add to that, Parry?
Thank you.
I was a bit concerned there, Mick, too, about the problems with parking local authorities. I mean, I suppose as councillors we can point things out, and I've had done some things in my ward near the city hospital where we've got problems, particularly with ambulances, for example. Is there anything we can do to improve that situation? Because that's obviously, you know, concerning if it's difficult with local authorities in terms of doing something about it.
Sorry, Chair. There is definitely a willingness to help us, and we've not come across any in terms of any blocking in terms of their support. I suppose I'm not a favour with the local planning regulations for road traffic. But the advice that we do get is on occasions. There was one street I particularly remember is where we felt that the double parking on either side of it was very problematic to us. And we sought advice from the district council, and they informed us that as part of their consultation, they would seek the views of residents, and that's the way that they would approach it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think that is actually how planning works, though, isn't it? Unfortunately, that's what we have to do. Okay.
If I could on that, I think, you know, as you'll know, there are a lot that councillors will do either in their constituent wards in terms of what you will do very much on the ground, and who you can engage with in terms of residents. So I definitely ask there is something that you can do across your, you know, your constituents. And I think what we are seeing certainly over the last 2 decades of certainly I've been working in and around the city, is that the amount of vehicles on the road designs, you know, we know the road network is not designed for it. And of course, we've now got houses that never had a car outside at all, now wanting to park 3 cars on the same road as everybody else. So it is a real problem. It's not a significant problem in terms of numbers of occurrences, but it does have the potential to be very, very significant for operational crews or ambulances in particular, less so for police, of course, because the vehicles generally are smaller than ours would be. So I think there is quite a lot we can do you know, as members within the planning or within your own sort of portfolios. So I think there are things in terms of what messages you want to send when making decisions around planning. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Craig. That's clear. Parry, can you come back on that?
Thank you for letting me come back. Yeah, I will agree with you and with Craig, but it's dreadful to think sometimes, you know, the parking either side of the road is so worrying in many cases. On a sea, it won't be able, fire authority or by ambulance going through in order to support the emergency situation arose because of an incident. And I think we should go a bit further. We as individual councillors, and I agree with you, we do care, and I'm sure my colleagues and all of the colleagues in the local authorities agree that we do our best in order to, but it needs a legislation of kind of support for the services to be able to do their job properly. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Do you want to add to that, Gul?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, actually, we had quite, you know, a lot of problem about the parking in our ward, Dales, because I think it wasn't the residents, it's the commuter, you know, the parking nearby the city and catch the bus down, and they really park both sides of the roads, especially in Sneinton, which is, you know, close to the city, and a lot of these commuters parking there. But from last year, because the COVID, not many people working in the city, and it's improved, you know, it's less problems from last year. And that was, you know, good, so that we didn't have no, you know, the blocking and that, but not happy with this, you know, COVID. I hope it's get over to it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. That's a good point, Gul. I mean, and Craig, generally speaking, how has the pandemic affected these statistics? Do we know? I mean, has it skewed them at all?
I don't think we're sort of we've got the kind of level of intelligence where I'd be able to give you anything particularly informed, Chair. You know, I'd probably be no more informed than Councillor Khan really, is that, you know, COVID has reduced. I mean, I would absolutely agree that. I mean, if you look at things like City Hospital as an example, commuter parking in the estates around the City Hospital has always been a nightmare. So commuters do add a massive issue to it. I do believe that what the city should be praised for, and I guess now the conurbation is the transport network it's got. You know, I have seen in my quarter of a century working for this service, I've seen the public transport network be pretty amazing. And it's already at capacity, even though that we've made more investment over time. So I think, you know, trying to encourage people around park and rides and public transport will help. But I suppose it'd be interesting to see, and I guess it links back into the repurposing of buildings in the city. I do have a concern that businesses will not reopen in terms of central premises, but they may become domestic properties. So I think if we look over the next couple of 3 years, as we come out of COVID, some of these things might be a good indicator as the results of it. But we'd need to make sure that we proactively collect that data so we can be informed about it rather than just guessing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Craig. We're in different times, aren't we? Anyone got anything else to add there? If you look at recommendations, folks, we've got note the progress made in terms of unwanted fire signals, support the exploration of developing a tried service unwanted fire signals policy. We're agreed with that. And then receive a further report with recommendations within 6 months. Is that okay, colleagues? Is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. I think that brings us to a close, if I'm right. Anything else? Sorry, it's the problem with having electronically. You have to scroll all the way back up, don't you? It's better for the environment, though. Okay, I think that's it, folks. I think that brings matters to a close. I'd like to thank people for their attendance, thank our colleagues in the service for their work, and again, wish everyone a happy new year and stay safe. Thank you very much.